All right. This is the second of a series of updates, and I'm focused on one fighter for this update. And this is going to come across as a rant, and I don't really care because this dude is being overhyped on places like NSB and others, and I don't see it, and I'm going to call it out for what it is. And I'm also going to call out the hypocrisy of it. I said it before on a previous deal. I like the heavyweights to act like heavyweights, which means your job and your goal is to go out there and get the fucking knockout. Um, I don't see that from certain of the heavyweights, and it drives me insane. And I'm not going to just give them credit where credit is not due. So I'm going to call it out for what it is, and I'm sorry. That's just how I feel about it, period, point blank. So the fighter that I'm criticizing today is Frank Sanchez. And the reason that I'm hypercritical of Frank Sanchez has less to do with his skill as a fighter and more to do with the way he does what he does. And I'm going to contrast and compare against other fighters in the same division so that I can make the case for why I am so critical of this dude in the first place so you understand. Now, if you want to refer to my source material to follow along with what I'm saying, the fight in question is the one that most recently happened. Frank Sanchez fought and beat Efe Ajagba, and this happened, I believe it was on the Wilder Fury 3 undercard, if my memory serves me. And I watched this live, and having never seen Frank Sanchez before, I never saw him, and I know he's undefeated and all that kind of stuff, and I do believe that people overrate Efe Ajagba. I think they overrate him. It was Efe Ajagba's first loss, and Ajagba's, but Ajagba's been wobbled before, so it's not like he was not already kind of exposed. It was just people overrate Ajagba, and I think that's what's happening with a lot of these areas. Like NSB in particular is just completely overrating this guy, Frank Sanchez, based on the Ajagba win. But Ajagba is one of those eye test fighters that was always sparking out B levels to look good. And I know that's kind of the trend. It's like we see these guys and they spark B levels, and because they look good sparking B levels, we give them the benefit of the doubt, right? And that's what I think Ajagba had benefited from is he's sparked guys. I mean, many of the guys, he has one name that I can call out that's of any relevance or worth, and that's Amir Mansour. Amir Mansour was a highly rated fighter, but let's be honest, Amir Mansour was on a steep decline because the last time he was of any relevance, true relevance, was back in 2014. And after that, he was just taking either losses or something else, but he was nowhere close to what he had been. Um, Mansour had failed a test, so it's like I did not rate that win for Ajagba, but it's like the best win he's got. Everybody else is a complete unknown or a regional somebody that had whatever, or we're coming off significant losses to everybody else in the division. Like we're talking B's and C's on Ajagba's record, but it's just because he either was knocking him out or like with he was supposed to fight Curtis Harper, and Curtis Harper basically just walked out. And but I don't know. When I saw Sanchez and Ajagba signed, I wasn't excited for the fight at all because I didn't rate Ajagba at all. And having never watched Frank Sanchez before this, I assumed it was just going to be another eye test type situation. And that was exactly what it is. So I believe firmly that this situation with Efe Ajagba is one where we are hyping Frank Sanchez, but I also think Joey Dawejko is another one where I think that people are looking at those two fights and they're saying, well, this guy's legitimate. Now I want to be clear here. This he's not world class. Either guy, they're not world class. They are regional type guys, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. But I then consider them kind of prospect level fighters. Frank Sanchez has been in the business now for close to 5 years, coming up on just over 4 years. So to me, that's prospect level. You haven't had enough time to really develop this reputation that you've gotten as this quality fighter, and then to fight somebody like Efe Ajagba, who I frankly did not rate at all. just because he's eye test, I'm not going to give you that credit. Was it a good win? Sure, but the problem really is beyond the optics of the untested fighters and the eye test and all this garbage. Frank Sanchez, as a heavyweight, and I want to stress that, as a heavyweight, has to be one of the most boring fighters I've ever witnessed in my entire time watching boxing, and that's a long span of time. He's just a boring fighter. People will call out the fact that I happen to have been a Floyd Mayweather fan, but let's be honest here. Floyd Mayweather would throw punches. He would constantly throw punches. No, he stopped throwing combos after he broke his hand, and I don't remember specifically, he called that one out. I believe it was Charmaine Mitchell fight, where he would start having hand injuries, his body started breaking down, and so he would throw less combos. But let's be honest here, he was still throwing punches. He was walking Shane Mosley down. He was walking Canelo Alvarez down. At the tail end of Oscar De La Hoya, he was throwing punches on him. Manny Pacquiao, I gave Manny 4 rounds, but ultimately you can make a case for just 2. But I gave Manny 4. The other 8, Floyd was tagging him at will. So it's this narrative that Floyd doesn't throw is nonsense. Go and watch every single fight he's had, and he is throwing. Now, the difference, though, is that when it's a welterweight fight, I'm less concerned about high work rate per se, and more about accuracy, because I know that we're dealing with high-level type guys in there. We're not dealing with, like at the lower weight classes, the superflies and the junior lightweights and all that. They kind of have to be more active because they have to convince the judges, because the judges are used to seeing the big guys go after knockouts. So the lesser guys have something more to prove, in my mind. That's the reason you get somebody like a Gary Russell Jr., Mr. Gary Russell Jr., who is a solid fighter, but he doesn't have a high work rate either. He gets wins predominantly because his opponents don't test him. The one guy that did test him beat him. That was Lomachenko, because Lomachenko was much more active. So it's a difference. When you're in a lighter weight class, I expect higher work rate, and then I expect your work rate to decline as you go up the ranks, just from my optics. So when you come up to welterweight, I expect precision, accuracy, because we already know that these guys are top level, generally speaking, and they're quality. And so I don't expect high work rate. When you start going up to junior middleweight, super middleweight, and then you start getting into cruisers and so on, I expect your work rate to go down, but I expect your level of effort to knock the guy out to go up. Meaning that I don't expect frequent punches. I expect power punches. And when I say power punches, I don't just mean jab to the body, even though it's a legal power punch. I mean that your intent is to knock the guy out every single time. It's the issue I have with Usyk when he fought, I believe it was Chisora. I didn't see Usyk have any urgency to get WAR Chisora out of the way. When you have Chisora, he works to try to get you the heck out of there. Say what you will about Dillian White. He works to try to get you out of there. It doesn't matter if you succeed or not. They work to try to do it. PEDvetkin, when he went to heavyweight, for the time he was there, he was working to try to get you out of there. And in some cases, he was successful. In some cases, he wasn't, but he was trying to do it. That was my biggest frustration about Grabomir Clinchko. At one point, he was actively trying to get you out of there. And then later in his career, he's just leaning on top of you and clinching, setting records for clinches and not actively trying to get you out of there. I would never rate Clinchko because of that performance and what he was doing. I like heavyweights to try to get the other guy out of there. That's my beef with Frank Sanchez. If you watch that fight and you're doing it near bedtime, it should put you to sleep, because he was actively avoiding any sort of engagement whatsoever. He barely threw any punches. The only time he threw punches is when Ajagba made mistakes coming in and he would catch him off a counter. He wasn't actively trying to get Ajagba out of there. That was my issue. Now, some people like NSB will say, well, Ajagba's a power puncher and he's dangerous. Here's the thing. I didn't see any risk to Sanchez even when he did come forward, because Ajagba has been an eye test fighter. It's easy to look good against the B's and the C's. When you're dealing with somebody like a Frank Sanchez type fighter, and most Cubans in general, but when you're dealing with a fighter like this, who is able to nullify that kind of offense, then no, I don't see that. I don't see this amazing risk that you guys seem to see. I don't see it at all. What I do see of Frank Sanchez from the past, so we're talking the old day Frank Sanchez, apparently this is a different style that he adopted specifically for certain fights recently. I don't know what that means. big picture. I don't know what that means. I don't know if that means that he just picks and chooses his shots. Okay, that's cool. But I do, again, you stunk out the joint against Efe Ajagba when I felt like you should have worked to try to get him out of there, even with defensive prowess. I don't want to see you basically not throwing, actively not throwing. And I'm not going to overrate you because you're fighting guys that you should beat. And because you're fighting guys that you should beat, you're out there stinking up the joint. When you fought Joey Dawejko, I honestly believe, for whatever reason, that guy didn't show up in this fight against Ajagba. He was, I think, offensively brilliant against Dawejko. Now, Dawejko's not a highly ranked fighter, but Dawejko's a dangerous puncher. He can be. But performance-wise, I saw more from him in that fight than I saw anywhere close in Ajagba, and I don't know why that was. If he was afraid of the power of Ajagba, to me, that fear should have gone away after 7 rounds. It should have been like, look, I see that you're nothing. I'm about to take you out. Here it is. We're about to go and deal with this because I'm going to get you out of here. That's what I want to see, and I didn't see it. The reason I'm talking about Sanchez now is, unfortunately, there was supposed to be a fight, and it was supposed to be booked, and due to a COVID diagnosis, it's been changed. But there was supposed to be a fight, and this was supposed to have Carlos Negron, who I rate pretty good. He's a pretty good fighter, Olympian. He was supposed to fight Frank Sanchez. And this fight's been, everything's been shifted around because of COVID diagnosis. And so now Sanchez is going to fight Christian Hammer. Christian Hammer he's a name only. He's a lesser fighter. He's lost to the B level. He's not, I don't think he's any kind of test. I don't think he's any kind of step up. I don't think he's any kind of worthwhile deal. I'm not, again, didn't rate Frank Sanchez against Efe Ajagba, and now I certainly am not going to rate him for this opponent. I know that they said they tried to get Carlos Negron cleared to do it, but apparently Negron was really badly affected by it, so it's not going to go forward. I understand. I do. For me, this is not going to improve my perception of him, Sanchez. As a fighter, it doesn't really test him. I think there were other options, and this is just going to be more eye test nonsense. Now, if Sanchez listens to it, and I doubt he will, but if he does, or anybody else, if Sanchez goes out there and he just completely blitzes Christian Hammer and gets him out of there like I expect he should, based on what I have seen, it's not going to allay my concerns about the dude, because it'll always have a question mark of why did you not get Ajagba out of there? And, I would be one calling for a rematch of that fight. I know some are like, no, he dominated him. Deep. At the end of the day, he didn't get him out of there like I thought he should. And we didn't see this. I didn't see any eye test of that fight. It was very boring, and he didn't have to try. And ultimately, Ajagba didn't have an answer for the jab, but we have to think that strategies might change when you go back in there again. And I would love to see that, if only to really put to rest the narrative that Ajagba lost because he was a lesser fighter, because I see them as equal. That's my concern. So if they're really equal, then it might just be that Ajagba failed to adjust, and in a rematch, it might be some completely different outcome, and he exposes Sanchez. We don't know. All I do know is I wouldn't want to see Christian Hammer, and that's apparently the fight that's been signed. That's now scheduled to happen now that Negron is out. This was supposed to occur, I believe, in January, possibly early January. This was supposed to happen, and I covered it as a co-main. And then Luis Ortiz and then Prince Charles Martin are going to be happening in the main event. So the main event, I'm cool, but I'm not a fan of this undercard at all. And it's unfortunate. Maybe it turns into something, but I don't think it's going to improve. At least it won't improve my perception of the dude, but it's certainly not going to improve his standing, or it shouldn't, because Sanchez just doesn't show up for whatever reason. It's not about skill. We recognize his skill. It's not about effective jab. We recognize the jab. I'm saying a heavyweight should actively try to get the opponent out of there, I believe firmly. And if Tyson Fury didn't inspire these heavyweights to do that the way he freaking looks, I don't know what to tell you, because it's like, come on, man. I didn't like it when Joshua ran from Andy Ruiz in the rematch. Same reason. You need to go and try to get him out of there. That's the risk of the game. Joshua now's talking about his health, the mental health, and he's going to be battered and all that. I mean, that's not the heart of a champion. That's not how you think as a champion. Preservation is something better left to the welterweights and the super lightweights and the lesser classes when they get a little bit older. To me, as a heavyweight, your job should be to go out there and try to get them out of there, and that's why certain welterweights are what they are. Is they're trying to get them out of there, and then they don't last that long. And then with the heavyweights, you get certain other ones that don't try to get them out of there, and then those are the ones that stink up the joint, and nobody wants to see because they're not able to finish. When that's what fight fans want to see is a finish of some kind, and as such, you get fights like Fury Wilder trilogy, which ultimately has the kind of action you would expect. Two guys who are actively trying to get the other out of there. That's what heavyweight needed. And I was hoping that we were back on that rise of getting back to where the heavyweight guys are actively trying to get each other out of there to convince fans that these fights are worth seeing, not boxing masterclasses at the high level where you're supposed to have this power and you can't seem to get the guy out of there because you're not even trying to do it. That's my opinion. I hold to it. I'm not trashing Frank Sanchez as a man. I don't know the dude. I'm saying I don't want to see boxing masterclasses at heavyweight. I want to see you try to get the freaking guy out of there. I want to see an active attempt and an effort to get the guy out of there. And if you're not going to do that, then I don't want to watch you fight. And that's unfortunate. But until we get that, we're always going to have where the lighter guys, the smaller guys, are the ones selling the money. If you look at the pound for pound rankings, the only one who's anywhere close to a heavyweight is Alexander Usyk. Well, that's sad because he's not a natural heavyweight. We don't have any heavyweights in pound for pound. What does that tell you? It tells you that they have not, none of them. Even Tyson Fury. He was able to do that against Wilder, but he hasn't done that kind of a performance against anybody but Wilder because he doesn't need to, because he fights to the level of his opposition. But we should see more heavyweights in the pound for pound if they were really doing what I feel is their job, which is to work to try to get the opponent out of there. When you see that they're on the decline, that's one thing. But I don't see Sanchez on the decline. I see he just doesn't want to try against somebody he thinks is a threat, and I understand that. But I feel that your job as a heavyweight is to go out there and go to war to get the guy out of there and make a statement and show that the big guys, are the ones where the money is. Take your hat off to WAR Chisora, for example, because that's exactly what he does every single time. He'll gas, but he'll try. He will try his ass off. That's what we should celebrate. And I don't want to hear about the CTE, because these are prize fighters. More importantly, they choose this life. They chose it going in knowing exactly what the risks were, and they're grown. They have every right to do whatever they want to do, and we can watch them, and you can vote with your wallet and say you don't want to see somebody get hit in the head, then you're not a boxing fan, because that's what boxing is. If you don't want to see it, great. But then I also don't want to see hypocritical behavior where you're criticizing Floyd Mayweather for his style, but then you're praising Frank Sanchez, because that's a hypocrite. You're a hypocrite when you do that, because no, it's not even the same situation, and it's not fair, because in Floyd's case, he had a physical inability to go out and do what he did against Arturo Gatti. Frank Sanchez, to my knowledge, has no physical inability to go out and get guys out of there. He just chose not to do it. Joshua wasn't hurt in the Ruiz rematch. He just chose to run and refused to engage. They're choosing to do that. They're choosing to fight like that, and you should not celebrate it, because there's no compelling reason why they should fight like that when they are perfectly capable as heavyweights to go out there and give the fans what they want to see. That's my piece on Frank Sanchez. I've nothing about the man. I don't know the man directly. I'm talking about the optics of you as a heavyweight going out, putting out a stinker, and then your next fight, it's not your fault, but the next fight is essentially a scrub that's already been taken out multiple times. It's not going to help your case, especially if you spark about epic fashion in places like NSB. You're going to call you number one pound for pound again when you don't really deserve it, because you went against Efe Ajagba and, in my mind, shut the bed. I don't want to see that from you guys in the heavyweight division. We need more exciting heavyweight fights, and it's an indictment on you guys that somebody that looks like Tyson Fury has given us one of the most exciting fights of the past 5 or 10 years at heavyweight division.